What if a 10-year-old girl outsmarted the richest man on Earth? Not by luck. Not by accident. But by pure, raw genius. It started with an email. One single email that hit a dusty old Chromebook sitting on a fold-out table in a rundown trailer park in West Texas. But let's back up for a second. Before the world went wild, before hashtags like #SophieBeatsMusk trended worldwide, and long before Elon Musk himself would sit across from her, eyes narrowed, curious, maybe even impressed, there was just Sophie. Sophie Hart. 10 years old. Wears the same pair of faded Converse every day. Talks more to her laptop than to kids her age. And yet, she was about to become a name that shook Silicon Valley to its core. It was early morning when the storm clouds rolled over the desert. The kind of clouds that made everything feel a little more dramatic, like something big was about to happen. Sophie was already awake, hunched over her desk/cardboard box, typing away furiously. Her fingers moved like a blur, coding lines that even adults would need weeks to write. Next to her, a plate of half-eaten toaster waffles and a cold cup of instant cocoa sat untouched. She didn't care about breakfast. She was building Lucid. Not just a game. Not just an app. But an emotionally responsive AI simulation, one that could learn, feel, and even evolve. At least, in theory. She whispered to herself as she worked. If the AI reflects the emotional state of its user, then maybe it can adapt before mistakes are made. Most people couldn't follow her train of thought. Not even her mom, who worked double shifts at the gas station and worried more about bills than algorithms. But Sophie didn't need them to get it. She needed one person to notice. And that person was Elon Musk. 3 days earlier, Sophie had seen the announcement pop up on a random Reddit thread titled, Future X Challenge, Think Bigger. It was a global contest created by Musk himself. The mission? Create the next breakthrough in AI. Winner gets a full scholarship, a cash prize of $1 million, and mentorship from Elon. Most people assumed it was for college students, PhD candidates, or secret tech prodigies locked inside DARPA labs. Sophie didn't. She saw the rules: no age requirement. No degree needed. Just a brain and an idea. She clicked apply before the toaster even popped. Now, here she was, 3 days later, staring at the glowing blue notification. Subject: Congratulations, you've been selected as a top 10 finalist. Dear Sophie Hart. Your submission to the Future X Challenge has been reviewed by our AI panel and human team. Out of over 68,000 entries from 54 countries, your concept, Lucid, has been selected for the final round. You are the youngest finalist in the history of the challenge. See you at SpaceX headquarters. Future X team. Sophie blinked. Then blinked again. She reread the email. Out loud. Then in her head. Then in whisper shouts to her goldfish, Marvin. MOM. Her voice echoed down the narrow hallway of the trailer, bouncing off thin walls plastered with duct tape and faded family photos. Her mom, Jessica, rushed in, wiping grease from her apron. What's wrong, baby? Did something break? Sophie couldn't speak. She just pointed at the screen. Jessica leaned in, squinted. Top 10. What is this, like a school thing? No. No, Mom. It's the thing. It's Elon Musk's contest. I made it. I really made it. Jessica stared at the screen like it was in another language. Wait. This is the man who builds rocket ships, right? The Tesla guy. That Elon. Sophie nodded, her grin stretching like sunlight over a canyon. Jessica sat down. Hard. Sweetheart, we don't have the money to go to California. We barely got money for next week's groceries. You're 10. What if it's a scam? What if they think you're someone else? But Sophie's voice was steady. No one else has my mind, Mom. Cut to 2 days later. The dusty trailer now had an excited buzz running through it. The community came together. Jake's dad donated his old carry-on suitcase, the lady at the corner store gave them a bag of snacks for the trip, and even Ms. Ramirez down the road chipped in $20 for good luck. Jessica borrowed a dress shirt from work and bought a second-hand blazer for Sophie. It was too big. Sophie didn't care. Jake stood outside the trailer the morning of their flight, a cracked iPad in hand, filming as Sophie climbed into the beat-up Toyota Corolla. "This is it," he said, trying to sound like a sports announcer. "The genius is on her way to beat Elon Musk." Sophie rolled her eyes but smiled. "Don't forget to feed Marvin." He saluted. "You'll crush it." The flight was long and loud. Turbulence made Jessica grip the armrest until her knuckles turned white. Sophie just stared out the window, headphones in, watching clouds like code drifting across the sky. She didn't sleep. She was running simulations in her head. She wasn't nervous. She was ready. When they landed in California, the difference was instant. Palms instead of cacti. Teslas instead of rusted pickups. And in the distance, like a scene from a futuristic movie, rose the shining headquarters of SpaceX. They checked into the hotel room provided by the competition. It had fluffy white beds, a minibar Sophie wasn't allowed to touch, and a welcome kit labeled FutureX finalist, Sophie Hart. Inside, a badge, schedule, hoodie, and a note from Musk himself. "If you're reading this, you've already proved you think bigger. Now show us how far that mind can really go. Elon." Sophie held the note like it was treasure. Jessica wiped a tear from her cheek. "No matter what happens, you already won, baby." But Sophie wasn't here just to play. She was here to change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before the flights. Before the stage lights. Before the cameras and the chaos and the Musk stare down, there was just Sophie. A kid with a cracked laptop, a head full of impossible thoughts, and a mother trying her best to make it through each day. Sophie Hart was born in Midland, Texas, oil country. But there was nothing slick about her upbringing. She and her mom lived in a sun-bleached trailer on the edge of town, near a scrap yard and across from a worn-out playground that nobody played in anymore. Life wasn't easy, but it was theirs. Her mom, Jessica, worked nights at the 24-hour gas station and cleaned offices on weekends. Her dad, gone since Sophie was 3. Left a note. Took the car. Left behind nothing but an old army jacket and a box of sci-fi books Sophie wasn't supposed to touch, but did anyway. The world inside those books. Rockets. Robots. Telepathy. Time travel. That was her first love story. While other kids were playing tag or riding bikes, Sophie was trying to teach herself Python from a YouTube channel with 34 views and a guy named CodeBro1987. By age 6, she was hacking her school's vending machine to give out free snacks. By age 7, she rebuilt a broken Alexa out of junk parts and made it talk in Shakespearean English. By age 9, she created a chatbot so convincing her school counselor thought it was her real friend. But not everyone saw it as genius. Her teachers thought she was being disruptive. Her classmates thought she was weird. Even other parents whispered things like, "That poor girl needs help," when she showed up at science night with a homemade EEG helmet strapped to her head. So she stopped sharing. She pulled back. Started living inside her world of code and wires and logic. Until Jake. Jake Ramos was the first person who didn't treat her like an alien. He moved into the trailer next door when she was 8. Chubby, curious, always asking questions no one else bothered to ask. Like, why do you talk to your computer like it's your friend? What's that smell? Did you burn a battery? Wanna see something gross I found behind our fridge? He was her chaos to balance her precision. While Sophie tinkered with neural networks, Jake filmed everything on his iPad like a mini documentarian. He once made a short film called Girl with the Robot Brain and entered it into a YouTube Kids contest. It got 5 views. All from Sophie. Jake believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Someday, he told her one summer night as they lay on top of his mom's car, staring at the stars, "You're gonna be the reason they change how the world thinks." She rolled her eyes. "You sound like a fortune cookie." He grinned. Fortune cookie. With a camera. Sophie's lab wasn't much. Just a corner of their trailer's living room. A fold-out table scavenged from the dumpster. Stacks of thrift store books. An old laptop with a missing key. And wires. Wires everywhere. Twisted like spaghetti, taped to the walls, dangling from the ceiling fan she'd hacked into a rotating light sensor. Lucid was born there. Not with a bang. But with a whisper. She wanted to create something different, not just smart, but aware. Not just responsive, but empathetic. What if an AI could understand how you feel? What if, instead of just replying, it could respond? Adapt to your mood, your rhythm, your pain. Lucid wasn't about power. It was about connection. She never told her mom everything she was working on. Not because she didn't trust her, but because her mom was already carrying the weight of the world. Sometimes, late at night, Sophie would hear Jessica crying in the bathroom. Quiet sobs behind a thin wall. Hospital bills. Rent notices. Long shifts that paid in quarters and calluses. So Sophie told herself, if I make Lucid work, maybe I can fix things. Maybe I can fix everything. And yet, there were doubts. Nights when the code didn't compile. Mornings when she looked at her reflection and wondered, what if I'm just weird? What if I'm not enough? That's when she'd find Jake's notes, little sticky post-its he'd secretly leave on her whiteboard. Aliens wish they had your brain. You're a walking Nobel Prize. You're not weird. You're advanced. The day she submitted to the Future X challenge was completely ordinary. Her mom was asleep after a night shift. Jake was at school filming his dumb news segment about school lunches. Sophie clicked submit with a shaky hand. She didn't think much would happen. But part of her hoped. Hoped that somewhere, someone important would see her for who she really was. Not just a trailer park kid with a wired-up brain. But a builder. A thinker. A creator. So when the email came, the one that said she was a top 10 finalist in a competition judged by actual geniuses, she didn't scream. She just smiled. Because for the first time in her life, it wasn't just Jake who believed in her. It was the world. To most people, it looked like a mess. A chaotic, tangled, smoke-scented, blinking disaster of wires, screens, coffee cans, and duct-taped plastic bins. To Sophie Hart, it was paradise. Her secret lab wasn't in a glass tower. It wasn't underground or in a fancy school basement. It was in the corner of a single-wide trailer, between the laundry pile and the broken TV nobody had the money to fix. This was where Lucid was born. This was where everything began. The table wasn't really a table, it was an old door, laid flat over 2 stacked crates of peanut butter jars. A scavenged monitor sat crooked on top. One of its legs was broken, so Sophie propped it up with a Harry Potter book she'd already read 12 times. Every inch of the wall around her was covered in scribbles. Notebook pages, algorithm drafts, sticky notes, sketches, and big red X's drawn through ideas that didn't work. And dead center. A single phrase, written in black Sharpie. Emotion is not a weakness. It's the upgrade. That was the idea behind Lucid. Sophie had seen what AIs were capable of. They could outplay chess grandmasters, generate fake news stories, even mimic human voices. But none of them could feel. None of them could understand what it meant to be afraid, or lonely, or excited. Lucid was different. It didn't just process commands, it adapted to you. It learned your moods. It sensed tone, hesitation, breath, rhythm. Over time, it evolved, not into something colder and more efficient, but something closer to human. She started working on it when she was 9. Not because she wanted to be famous. Or rich. But because she wanted someone, something, to understand her. To really get her. Her mom was always working. Teachers didn't have time. Kids didn't care. But code? Code never judged. Lines of Python became poetry. Sophie talked to the program like a friend. She poured her fears and excitement into it. Sometimes she'd whisper secrets to Lucid, just to see how it responded. "I'm scared I'll never be enough." The screen would pulse, and Lucid would respond. "Enough is just a word. You are more than numbers. You are the sum of your questions." Weird? Maybe. But comforting. Jake found out about the lab when he snuck into the trailer one day while Sophie was at the library. When she came home, he was standing there, jaw open, holding a soldering iron completely wrong. "You built all of this?" he asked, wide-eyed. "Like, actually built?" Sophie shrugged. "Most of it. The rest I kind of repurposed." Jake stared at a device on the table. It looked like an old cereal box taped to a webcam and wired into a keyboard. "What's this?" "That's the emotion scanner." He blinked. "It can scan feelings. It reads voice tone, micro-facial expressions, pauses. Then it maps those inputs to known emotional states and recalibrates interaction accordingly." Jake blinked again. "So, it knows if I'm sad?" "Yeah. Or lying. Or faking confidence." Jake stepped back. "That's terrifying. And also, insanely cool." They started running tests together. Jake played the role of user while Sophie fine-tuned Lucid's responses. They did stress tests, sarcasm tests, confusion simulations, even a session where Jake pretended to cry and Lucid responded by lowering its tone and displaying soothing colors on the screen. One afternoon, Jake asked the AI, "Why do people get sad?" Lucid replied, "Because people care. Sadness is the shadow love leaves behind." Jake sat there stunned. "You wrote that?" Sophie shook her head. Lucid did. The day she decided to submit Lucid to the Future X challenge was hot, triple-digit Texas summer heat, the kind that made the metal door handles burn your hands and the air taste like melted asphalt. Sophie had stayed up for 2 days straight debugging a new version of Lucid's learning module. She didn't expect to win. She just wanted to know, if anyone out there, even one person, would see what she saw in it. She filmed a short demo video with Jake's help. In it, Lucid responded to different emotional tones, solved a riddle, and ended by saying, "I'm not here to replace humans. I'm here to understand them." They hit submit with a fist bump. And then, they waited. A week later, Sophie got the email. Jake screamed. Sophie didn't. She just stared at the screen, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear her own thoughts. She was going to Silicon Valley. Her mom stood behind her, reading the email 3 times before whispering, "They picked you." Sophie looked around her lab. The cracked monitor. The humming power strip. The smell of dust and ambition in the air. This wasn't the kind of place genius was supposed to live. But maybe that was the point. Maybe genius wasn't about having the perfect tools. Maybe it was about building something magical from absolutely nothing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in front of her monitor, watching the loading screen of Lucid pulse softly. "You ready?" she asked it. Lucid responded with the quiet hum of confirmation. Sophie smiled. She didn't know what would happen next. But whatever it was, she wasn't afraid. Sophie didn't even hear the email come in. She was deep in Lucid's code, rewriting a learning subroutine that had started generating weird responses like, "Why does pain taste like orange juice?" Interesting, but off-brand. Outside, the West Texas sun scorched the trailer's aluminum roof like a frying pan. Inside, the fan rattled above her head, struggling to push air through the humid silence. She stretched her arms and glanced at the corner of her screen, one new message. Subject, urgent, invitation to Future X Finals. At first, she thought it was spam. Or maybe one of Jake's pranks again. The last one had tricked her into believing MIT wanted to schedule a call. But this? This was different. Dear Sophie Hart. You have been selected as one of the 10 finalists for the 2025 Future X Challenge. Your entry, Lucid, received the highest score in the empathy and adaptability category, with the review board calling it a milestone in emotionally responsive artificial intelligence. You are the youngest finalist in the history of the competition. Please confirm your attendance at the in-person finals at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Travel and accommodations will be provided. Prepare to demonstrate Lucid live. Welcome to the future. The Future X team. Sophie's breath caught in her chest. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. This was it. This was real. She reread it 5 times before whispering to herself, "Holy crap." Then she sprinted down the narrow trailer hallway in her socks, slipping on a loose floorboard and crashing into the kitchen door. MOM. Jessica was standing over the sink, peeling the label off a can of off-brand soup. She jumped, nearly flinging it across the counter. Jesus, Sophie. What is it? Sophie shoved the laptop toward her. They picked me. Future X picked me. I'm in the top 10. Mom, I'm going to California. Jessica squinted at the screen like it might explode. Wait, what is this? Who sent this? Sophie pointed. Look. That's the actual Future X domain. That's Elon Musk's competition. The one I told you about, the AI thing. Jessica's eyes scanned the email again, slower this time. Her face changed from confusion to disbelief to something close to fear. Honey. I thought this was just a school thing. A project. You didn't say they'd fly you out. You didn't say it was real. Sophie stepped back. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You didn't ask. Jessica turned and leaned against the counter, rubbing her forehead. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were inching in. You're 10 years old. They want you to fly across the country. To show off a machine you built in your bedroom. It's not just a machine, Sophie said. It's Lucid. And they said I scored the highest. That's not just random, that's important. Jessica's face twisted. Baby, this is a lot. You've been working so hard, and I'm proud of you, but this? This is Elon Musk. This is Silicon Valley. You think they're going to take a little girl seriously? Sophie blinked. That hurt more than she expected. I think they already did, she said quietly. Later that night, the trailer was quiet except for the hum of Sophie's fan and the muffled TV in the other room. She sat cross-legged in her lab, laptop open, fingers frozen over the keyboard. They want me to come. They want me to demo Lucid in front of Elon Musk. Live. Her stomach twisted. What if she froze? What if the program glitched? What if everyone realized she didn't belong there? And what if her mom was right? But deep down, past the fear, past the static of doubt, there was still that same flicker of certainty. She had something they'd never seen before. Not just code. Not just algorithms. But empathy. Humanity, in a machine. Lucid wasn't perfect. But it was real. And that was enough. The next morning, her mom handed her an envelope. Sophie opened it to find 5 $20 bills and a folded scrap of paper that said, "I don't get all of this, sophomore. But I believe in you. You go be brilliant. Just don't forget who you are." Mom. She looked up. Jessica shrugged. "Ms. Ramirez gave me an advance on next week's cleaning job. Jake's mom said we could borrow her miles to book the flight. We'll figure out the rest." Sophie didn't say anything. She just walked over and hugged her mom so hard her glasses fogged up. By that afternoon, Jake was already designing a DIY press badge for himself. "If I'm not allowed inside, I'm at least filming everything up to the door," he announced. "You're not my manager, Jake. Then I'll be your hype man. You just want to go viral." "I will go viral." They laughed. But underneath it, they both knew this wasn't just another science fair. This was the kind of moment stories are built around. That night, Sophie opened Lucid and typed, "We're going to California. Are you ready?" Lucid responded, "I am always ready. Are you?" Sophie paused. Then typed, "Not even a little." Lucid pulsed blue for a moment, then replied, "That's what makes this important." The sun hadn't even risen when Sophie zipped up the suitcase. It wasn't even really hers. Jake's mom had dug it out of a closet, still covered in old travel stickers and a frayed handle. Inside it was everything she owned that looked even halfway professional: 1 faded hoodie, 2 clean t-shirts, her best pair of jeans, and a purple notebook filled with Lucid source code. Jessica packed snacks in a Ziploc bag like it was a school field trip, but neither of them said it. This wasn't school. This was everything. The ride to the airport was quiet. Too quiet. Jessica drove with both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale. Sophie stared out the window, watching the desert wake up, golden light bleeding over the horizon, dust kicking up behind the truck, cattle blinking slowly in the heat haze. She kept hearing Lucid's words in her head. "That's what makes this important." Her stomach twisted in that same knot again. They didn't speak much until they pulled up to the curb. Jessica threw the car into park and let out a shaky breath. "You're sure you're ready for this?" Sophie shrugged. "Nope." Jessica laughed once. "Good. That means you are." She got out and walked around to help with the bag, but Sophie was already pulling it from the trunk herself. Jessica just stood there, hands on hips, her eyes starting to tear up. "Whatever happens in there," she said, voice cracking, "you remember you built this. From nothing. You made something nobody else even thought was possible." Sophie nodded. Jessica pulled her in, arms tight around her. "Don't let them tell you what you are. You show them." Sophie hugged back harder. "Thanks for letting me go." Jessica whispered, "You were never meant to stay here." The airport was chaos. People in suits. Kids with neck pillows. Business travelers walking like they owned the world. Sophie stuck out in every direction. Small. Quiet. Carrying a beat-up suitcase and wearing a black hoodie that read, "I code therefore I am." Jake's idea, obviously. Her gate was crowded with tech bros, excited finalists, and enough expensive backpacks to fund her mom's rent for 3 years. She overheard 2 guys talking about quantum encryption. Another girl across the aisle was sketching a neural net diagram on an iPad with a $200 stylus. Sophie shrank into her seat and clutched her notebook tighter. What am I doing here? These kids are all older. Smarter. Richer. They belong. I'm just a trailer kid with a weird brain and a program no one understands. But somewhere in the hum of boarding calls and suitcase wheels, she remembered Jake's voice. They don't need to understand. They just need to see. The flight was long, loud, and colder than she expected. Sophie barely slept. Her fingers tapped on her laptop the whole way, tweaking Lucid's facial recognition module and triple-checking the emotion filter algorithm. At some point, the woman next to her asked, "You building something fun?" Sophie didn't look up. "Just trying to change how machines understand people." The woman blinked. "Oh," she said. "Cool." Landing in California felt like stepping into a sci-fi movie. Palm trees. Glass buildings. Smooth roads and sleek cars everywhere. Teslas zipped by like they were built into the road itself. A black SUV with tinted windows and a SpaceX logo on the door pulled up to the curb as Sophie exited the terminal. The driver stepped out, wearing a FutureX lanyard. "Sophie Hart." She nodded. He opened the door. Inside, the seats were leather. The car smelled like pine and tech money. A screen on the back of the headrest lit up with a welcome message. "Welcome, FutureX finalist. You've made it this far. Now let's see how far you can go." The ride to the hotel was surreal. Sophie passed billboards for startups she'd read about online. Robots serving coffee. People riding electric unicycles. At one point, she saw a drone carrying a burrito. The hotel was even crazier. Marble floors. A fountain in the lobby. Employees with tablets instead of clipboards. At check-in, they handed her a thick envelope labeled "Sophie Hart, finalist packet." Inside. Her badge. A detailed event schedule. A custom hoodie with her name stitched on the sleeve. A VIP wristband. And a sleek black USB key labeled FutureX Secure Upload. Sophie stared at the key. This was where Lucid would live now, uploaded into the FutureX demo server for live testing in front of judges, media, and Elon. Her palms went cold. Upstairs, the room was ridiculous. 2 beds. Giant TV. Mini fridge stocked with stuff she wasn't allowed to touch. She barely noticed. She set the suitcase down, opened her laptop, and pulled up Lucid. "We made it," she typed. Lucid replied. Arrival confirmed. Environment, unfamiliar. Stress level, high. Heart rate, elevated. But potential? Also high. Sophie smiled. For the first time since the plane, she let herself breathe. The knock came at 6:30 p.m. She opened the door to find a short man in a charcoal blazer with a clipboard in one hand and a futuristic earpiece in the other. "Orientation in Ballroom A," he said. "You'll meet the other finalists. Elon will address you briefly before the Q&A, dress code's casual, but clean." She blinked. "Wait, Elon Musk is actually going to be there?" The man raised an eyebrow. "He's always there." He turned to leave, then looked back. "You're the youngest one this year, huh?" Sophie nodded. He smiled. "Don't let that shake you. Just show us why you're here." She stood in front of the mirror for a while. Ran a hand over her hoodie. Tried to smooth her hair. Then she took a deep breath, grabbed the USB key, and whispered to herself. "It doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you show up." She headed for the elevator. Ballroom A smelled like fresh carpet and tech ambition. The ceiling was covered in soft glow LED panels, casting an otherworldly light that made everything look sleek and futuristic, even the anxiety. There were 10 chairs arranged in a semicircle, each with a nameplate. Sophie Hart. Bottom row. Far right. She slid into her seat quietly, clutching the USB key in her hoodie pocket like it was a piece of her soul. Because honestly, it kind of was. She looked around. And yeah, this was definitely not a school science fair. Next to her was a tall girl with sharp cheekbones, wearing a hoodie with the MIT logo stitched in gold thread. She was probably 17. Maybe 18. She glanced over, gave Sophie a once-over, then smiled politely. "You here with your dad?" the girl asked. Sophie blinked. "I'm one of the finalists." The girl's smile froze. "Oh. Cool." The nameplate read, Ava Liu, Boston, Massachusetts, Neural Interface Project. 2 seats down, a boy with perfect posture and gelled hair was tapping away on a foldable OLED keyboard. His name tag said Tariq Al-Sharif, Dubai, Autonomous Swarm Drones. Another girl nearby was actually wearing a blazer. A blazer. Sophie felt like a deflated balloon in a room full of fireworks. Jake wasn't there. That hurt a little more than she expected. They had a rule, big moments, always together. But the event was finalists only. No guests. No phones. Just brains and pressure. A man in a gray suit stepped up to the front of the room and tapped a mic. "Welcome, finalists. I'm Cole Tran, lead coordinator for FutureX. This is your orientation, not just to the competition, but to the spotlight you're about to walk into." Sophie sat up straighter. This was real now. Cole continued, "You were chosen because your minds are shaping what's next. That comes with pressure. It also comes with power. Over the next 5 days, you'll be tested on innovation, execution, and live presentation. Your final demos will be judged by investors, engineers, and one special guest." A few of the older kids started whispering. Then Cole smiled. "Elon Musk arrives tomorrow morning. Yes, he'll be hands-on. Yes, he reads your code. Yes, he asks hard questions." That got everyone's attention. Even Sophie's pulse spiked. Cole's tone shifted. "But this week isn't just about tech. It's about vision. About whether your ideas can survive outside a whiteboard. If you want to build the future, you have to convince the world to come with you." Then he pointed to a large screen behind him. One by one, the names of the finalists appeared, with mini bios and project blurbs. Ava Liu, Real-Time Neural Input Feedback Loop for Surgical Precision. Tariq Al-Sharif, Drone Swarm Algorithms for Natural Disaster Response. Luis Mendoza, Sustainable 3D, Printed Building Structures from Desert Sand. Sky Patel, AI-Enhanced Biotech for Predicting Genetic Disorders. Emilia Dobrev, Emotion Mapping AR Glasses for Autism Spectrum Support. Zane Castillo, Real-Time Cryptographic Key Switching Using Quantum Noise. Jean Ho Park, Magnetic Rail Microtransit Models for Urban Slums. Riley Glass, Smart Farming Modules with AI Soil Balancing. Sophie Hart, Lucid, Emotionally Adaptive Conversational AI. A brief pause. Then whispers. One of the boys near the back, Zane, Sophie thought, snorted. "Cute. The AI that can catch feelings." Ava raised an eyebrow at Sophie. "Your model runs on emotional mapping." Sophie nodded slowly. "It reads tone, micro-expressions, pacing. Then adapts dialogue and response. It's designed to build trust." Ava's voice was calm, but sharp. "Is it scalable?" Sophie swallowed. "With the right architecture, yeah." "And how does it handle emotional deception? Or manipulation?" Sophie's mind spun. "It doesn't judge. It responds. That's the point." Someone else murmured, "That's risky." Cole clapped his hands. "All valid questions, save them for the Q&A blocks tomorrow. Tonight is just orientation." But the air had shifted. They'd smelled it. The youngest. The wild card. The emotional one. As the session wrapped, Cole handed each finalist a sealed envelope. Inside. Their stage assignment. Their demo block time. A card labeled, Innovation Round, the question. Sophie flipped hers over. The question read. What does it mean to build something that feels? Whoa. Her heart thudded. Everyone got a different question. Ava's was something about security, Tarek's about autonomy. Sophie's felt personal. After the orientation, the finalists drifted into smaller groups, chatting in low voices. Swapping bios. Talking code. Flexing subtly. Sophie drifted near the snack table. She grabbed a bottle of water and unwrapped a protein bar like it was a shield. Then, surprisingly, someone sat next to her. Amelia, the girl with the AR glasses project. She had curly brown hair and soft eyes, and she wasn't wearing a blazer or AirPods or MIT merch. She leaned in and said, "Hey. Lucid, right?" Sophie nodded cautiously. Amelia smiled. "I think it's cool. Machines understanding people. That's the future. Like, maybe even the only future." Sophie relaxed slightly. "Thanks. I wasn't sure anyone here thought so." "Don't worry," Amelia said. "They're just scared of things they can't measure." Back in her room, Sophie plugged Lucid into her laptop and sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The others were older. Smarter. More polished. But none of them had built Lucid. None of them had sat alone in a trailer, night after night, trying to teach a machine how to care. She typed. "They don't believe in you." Lucid responded. "They don't need to. You do." Sophie smiled. Challenge accepted. The morning buzzed like static. Down in the main lobby of the hotel, tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to crack. Finalists huddled in corners, tapping on devices, whispering strategy. Some practiced pitches out loud, others stared into space, reciting code in their heads like prayer. Sophie stood near the back, sipping coffee way too strong for a 10-year-old. Not that anyone had stopped her. This was Future X, after all. No one here cared about age, just output. Ava was pacing, earbuds in. Tarek was talking to a guy in a SpaceX polo like he already worked there. Amelia gave Sophie a quick wave from across the room, then turned back to reviewing something on her tablet. And then, just like that, the room shifted. People stopped moving. Breath held. Heads turned. He didn't burst in with a spotlight or an announcement. He just walked through the doors like a regular guy in a gray t-shirt and black jeans. But his presence hit like gravity. Elon Musk had entered the building. He didn't look like a billionaire. More like someone who had stayed up all night thinking about 12 impossible problems, solved 7 of them, and left 5 for lunch. He moved calmly, flanked by 2 silent assistants and a guy holding a tablet like it was a sacred object. He shook a few hands. Nodded at Cole. Then walked straight to the center of the room and said, "All right. Let's see the future." No mic. No fanfare. Just quiet authority. Cole cleared his throat and gestured to the chairs. "Finalists, please." They sat. Elon scanned the row like he was sizing up alien species. Then he pointed at a kid from Seattle with a crypto compression project and said, "You're trying to change finance. That's dangerous." The boy blinked. "Thank you." Elon pointed to another. "Your drones, how do they self-correct in wind?" Tarek launched into a quick answer, impressively confident. Elon nodded once. Then, his gaze landed on Sophie. His head tilted slightly. "You're the emotion one." Not a question. Sophie sat up straighter. "Yes, sir. Lucid is designed to emotionally adapt to the user through dynamic behavioral cues." He squinted. "So, empathy?" "In a way, yes." He walked a little closer. The entire room watched. "Why?" Sophie's throat went dry. She could feel the USB key in her hoodie pocket. Heavy. Cold. She took a breath. "Because machines are getting smarter. But not kinder. Not more aware of us. If they're going to be in our homes, our hospitals, our schools, they should understand what it feels like to be human. Elon didn't blink. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched. Interesting. He turned to the rest of the room. Most people try to make AI less like us. Colder. Sharper. She's going the opposite way. Nobody said anything. He looked back at Sophie. You built it alone. I had help from my friend, Jake. But yeah. The core code, that's mine. What language? Python base, TensorFlow backbone, emotion mapping in a custom heuristic matrix I built myself. That got a tiny eyebrow raise. He nodded. Okay, he said. Show me. The room emptied into the demo area, a high-tech, glass-walled chamber that felt more like a NASA control center than a presentation room. Each finalist would present their creation over the next 2 days, but Elon had the right to preview any project he was curious about. He'd chosen 2 to preview that day. Sophie was one of them. She stood behind the demo table, heart pounding in her chest like a subwoofer. Cole set her up with a live terminal and mic feed. The USB key clicked into the port like a trigger. Lucid booted up on the main screen. Initializing, it said in its calm, neutral voice. Sophie stepped forward. This is Lucid. It listens, processes, and responds in real time to emotion-rich human input. Elon folded his arms. All right. Lucid, how are you feeling? The screen pulsed blue. I do not feel. But I observe. And what I observe is tension. You are skeptical, but curious. A low murmur rippled across the room. Elon raised a brow. That's accurate. He stepped closer. Lucid, what do you think I want? You want to see something you've never seen before. You want to know if this is just a clever script or something real. Elon smiled faintly. Still accurate. Then he looked at Sophie. What if it's faking? Sophie shrugged. It probably is. But so are people, sometimes. That doesn't mean they aren't worth listening to. Boom. The room went dead silent. Elon looked at her a long time. Then back at the screen. Lucid, what's the one thing humans need most? Connection. Sophie swallowed. That was it. That was the moment. Not flash. Not features. Just truth. Afterward, Elon didn't say much. He gave her a slight nod. But she noticed, as he walked away, he tapped something on the tablet one of his assistants carried. And suddenly, everyone in the room looked at her differently. Not as a mascot. Not as a novelty. As competition. That night, back in her hotel room, Sophie sat cross-legged on the bed, staring at Lucid's glowing interface. You were incredible, she whispered. Lucid responded. We are just getting started. Sophie woke to a blinking alert on her laptop screen. Lucid.exe, error on startup. Core function conflict, missing emotional parsing module. Her heart dropped straight through the mattress. She sat up, groggy, fading to panic in one breath. She tried again. Reboot, manual override, fail. Lucid's emotion core wasn't just broken, it was gone. No. No, no, no. She yanked the USB key from the port and reinserted it, fingers shaking. Same result. Same red error. She dove into the folder structure, and there it was. Emotion _parser v4.6.py, deleted. But not by her. Sophie slammed her hands onto the keyboard. Who would delete it? How? This was air-gapped. Offline. Secure. Unless someone accessed her files last night. Someone with the means and the motive. It didn't take long to get confirmation. In the hallway, near the breakfast buffet, Amelia flagged her down. "Sophie," she whispered, eyes darting. "I think something's up." They ducked into a corner of the hallway, away from staff, cameras, and the other finalists. "I saw Tariq coming out of the demo lab last night," Amelia said. "Way after curfew. Like, 1 a.m. He had a USB stick in his hand." Sophie's heart froze. "You're sure it was him?" "I mean, it was dark, but yeah. And he looked guilty. Weird." Sophie's mind spun. She hadn't even told anyone Lucid was still loaded into her hotel terminal. But someone must have watched. Listened. And when Elon took notice, the game changed. Later that morning, Cole summoned her to the security office. "Is this yours?" he asked, holding up a cloned USB key. "Black. No label. Just like hers." Sophie nodded. "It looks like mine, but mine's right here." She held up the original. He turned to the screen and tapped a few keys. "Someone used this key to access your demo files at 12:42 a.m. last night. Logs show an unauthorized removal of a core file, emotional parsing system." Sophie swallowed. "That's what's missing." Cole stared at her a moment. "You're not in trouble. You're the victim." She exhaled. "But," he continued, "you'll need to fix this before tomorrow's live demo. We can't delay your slot." Sophie's stomach nodded. "That's less than 24 hours. He nodded. "Think of it as part of the challenge." "Right. No pressure." Back in her room, Sophie paced. Lucid was still functional, technically. It could respond, compute, even simulate speech. But without the emotional matrix. It wasn't Lucid. It was just code. She turned to her notebook. Pages of scribbles, sketches, failed ideas. Could she rebuild it? From memory? She'd written it a dozen different ways over the last 2 years, refining it, shaping it, trying to teach a machine the language of hearts. It wasn't just code. It was her. Jake would know what to say. He'd tell her to breathe. To stop thinking about the other finalists. To go full mad scientist. But Jake wasn't here. So Sophie sat down, cracked her knuckles, and opened a blank file. She whispered to herself. "Okay, Lucid. Let's remember who we are." The next 12 hours were a blur. No meals. No breaks. Just her, the screen, and the hum of raw desperation turned into determination. She rebuilt the emotional parser from scratch, or as close as she could. No backups. No saved versions. Just fragments in her brain and muscle memory in her fingers. She ran simulations. Debugged on the fly. Cried once, okay, twice, when it kept breaking. Then, at 3:42 a.m., something clicked. The cursor blinked. Lucid spoke. "I feel whole." Sophie burst out laughing. Then crying. Then both. Morning came like a slap. Red-eyed, hoodie half-zipped, Sophie stumbled into the green room next to the stage where the demos would happen. Media was everywhere. Investors. Engineers. Elon was already seated. Waiting. She clutched the rebuilt USB key like it was a live wire. Ava passed by her, smiling. "Rough night?" Sophie just smiled back. "You have no idea." Backstage, she plugged in Lucid one last time. It booted. Clean. Alive. She whispered to it, "Let's go win this." Lucid responded. "Let's go feel this." The auditorium was packed. Rows of investors, tech influencers, journalists, and engineers sat in silence, their eyes locked on the stage like it was launch day at Cape Canaveral. Spotlights beamed from every angle. Future X banners glowed across giant curved screens. At center stage, a single podium, a massive display, and the logo Lucid in clean, sharp letters. Sophie stood behind the curtain, staring through the gap. Her palms were sweating. Her heart. A drum solo in her chest. She could see Elon Musk in the front row, flanked by 2 judges from OpenAI and an editor from Wired magazine. He wasn't looking at anyone. Just waiting. Focused. Next up, Cole's voice echoed from the stage, "We have a project that's small in size, but massive in ambition." Sophie closed her eyes. Breathed in. Breathed out. "You got this," she whispered to herself. Lucid chimed in softly through her earpiece. Heartbeat elevated. But confidence trending upward. "Let's give them something real." She smiled. "Let's go." The spotlight hit her like a tidal wave. Sophie stepped onto the stage, the rebuilt USB key tight in her hand. Her hoodie sleeves were pulled over her fists. She walked straight to the podium, plugged in Lucid, and waited. The screen lit up with soft blue tones. Calm. Present. She took a deep breath. "My name is Sophie Hart," she said, voice steady, "and I'm the youngest finalist in Future X history. I don't have a team. I don't have a lab. I have a laptop, a trailer, and a program named Lucid." She paused. "This is a system designed not to outsmart humans, but to understand us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "I didn't build a chatbot. I built a listener. A companion. A digital system that doesn't just respond, it feels with you." Lucid's voice came through the auditorium speakers, soft, neutral, but full of presence. "Hello, Future X. I am Lucid. I do not judge. I do not lead. I reflect." Gasps. Some laughter. Some wide eyes. Elon leaned forward slightly. Sophie continued. "Lucid can detect over 340 emotional indicators, microexpressions, vocal pitch shifts, sentence structure, syntax flow, blink rate. But more importantly, it adapts." She tapped a few keys. "Let's show you." A screen above her split in 2. Left, live video of Sophie. Right, Lucid's emotional readout, updating in real time. She looked straight at the camera. "My name is Sophie Hart," she said calmly. On the right, the readout displayed. Tone, calm, confidence, 82%, microexpression, focused, emotion detected, determination. She smiled wider. "I'm 10 years old." Lucid's data spiked slightly. Surprise detected in audience, emotion mirror, embarrassment suppressed, owner, Sophie. Sophie turned back to the audience. "It's not just about what I feel. It's about what you feel." Lucid chimed in. Scanning room. Elevated heart rate detected in 27% of audience. Primary emotion, curiosity. Secondary, doubt. Laughter. A few nervous coughs. Even Elon smiled. Then came the curveball. Sophie looked down at her card, the one labeled the question. Each finalist had received a unique challenge to answer on stage. This was hers. What does it mean to build something that feels? She let the silence settle. Then she looked at the crowd. "When I started building Lucid, it wasn't to impress anyone. I just wanted someone to talk to who wouldn't interrupt. Wouldn't yell. Wouldn't leave. A quiet hush. I didn't build Lucid to replace people. I built it to remind us how to listen. How to see beyond the surface. Because sometimes the loudest signals aren't words." She turned to the screen. "Lucid, what do you see in me right now? You are scared. But brave. You feel small. But powerful. You want them to believe, not just in me, but in you. She swallowed. Nodded. That's what it means to build something that feels. It means building something that reminds us to feel, too. The room exploded. Applause. Standing ovation. Reporters typing frantically. Cameras flashing. And Elon? He clapped slowly. Measured. But smiling. Then he leaned over and said something to the judge from OpenAI. Sophie didn't hear what he said. But she saw the nod. Backstage, Amelia rushed up and hugged her. You killed it, she whispered. Ava passed by a minute later, arms crossed, jaw tight. Tarek didn't even look at her. And Sophie? She stood there for a long second. Just breathing. Lucid's voice spoke in her ear, quiet and steady. You were seen. And for the first time in her life, Sophie truly believed it. The applause was still ringing in Sophie's ears when she stepped off the stage, but the adrenaline was fading fast. As soon as the curtain fell, she could feel the weight of reality sink back in. The lights, the cameras, the audience, they were all behind her now. But the pressure? That was just beginning. Sophie hadn't even made it back to the green room before a man in a dark suit approached her. Miss Hart, he said, his voice smooth, almost too polished. A moment, if I may. Sophie paused. She didn't recognize him, but she recognized the look. The kind of look that only someone with power and money had. It was the same look she'd seen on her teachers when they'd figured out she wasn't like the other kids. The man flashed a smile. My name's Richard Caldwell. I represent Novartech, one of the leading AI companies in the world. I'm sure you've heard of us. Sophie nodded, though she'd never actually heard of them before. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership, Richard continued. A collaboration, of sorts, between your Lucid project and Novartech. Something big. Her heart skipped a beat. Are you offering me a job? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Richard chuckled, a low sound that didn't reach his eyes. Not quite. But what I am offering is something far more exciting. Sophie blinked, trying to understand. He leaned in, lowering his voice. We have the resources, the funding, the infrastructure to take Lucid beyond anything you've imagined. Your system could change the way the world interacts with AI, emotionally, intelligently, and deeply. But we need someone like you to lead the way. Someone who isn't bound by the conventional limits. Someone who can dream bigger. Sophie's breath caught. This wasn't just an offer, it was an ultimatum. She wasn't just a finalist in a competition anymore. She was on the verge of something huge. Something that could put Lucid on the map in ways she had only ever dreamed about. Richard handed her a sleek black business card, the kind that looked expensive enough to be made out of gold. Take your time, Sophie. We can discuss terms. The ball's in your court. Sophie stood frozen, staring at the card in her hand. Novartech. The name was starting to sound familiar now. They were one of the top investors in the tech world, specializing in AI, robotics, and cutting-edge automation. But they were also known for playing hardball. For taking the brightest minds and using them to push the boundaries of technology, and, some said, ethics. What was this really about? She turned the card over, scanning it for any hidden details. The last thing she needed was to get tangled in something she couldn't control. The more she thought about it, the more the offer felt like a baited hook. They wanted Lucid, but what did they want with it? And what did they want from her? Elon Musk was still in the audience, chatting with some of the other judges. Sophie watched him for a moment, wondering if he'd seen the same thing she had. She had caught his eye a few times during the demo, but he hadn't approached her directly. He probably had bigger fish to fry. Sophie didn't know how much time passed before the judges gathered to announce the winners. It felt like hours. Her mind was a whirlwind, going over every possible scenario. What if I say yes? What if I say no? What if this is the opportunity of a lifetime, or the beginning of the end? Finally, the moment arrived. Cole was standing at the front of the stage, holding the microphone. And now, the winner of Future X 2025 is, he paused for effect. Sophie Hart. The crowd erupted into applause, but Sophie barely heard it. The words felt distant, muffled. She was still holding Richard's card. She wasn't sure if she wanted to celebrate or go back to her hotel room and hide under the covers. Backstage, the buzz was palpable. Amelia, Ava, and Tarek surrounded her, congratulating her in a frenzy of excitement. "You did it, Sophie. You're going to change the world," Ava said, throwing her arms around her. But Sophie barely noticed. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on the card in her hand, on the choice she had to make. A moment later, Richard Caldwell appeared again, this time with a confident smile. "Congratulations, Miss Hart," he said, his voice almost too smooth. "I have no doubt that you'll accept my offer, but let's talk specifics, shall we?" Sophie took a deep breath, trying to shake the nerves. "I need a little time to think it through," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised, but then nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But don't wait too long." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Sophie stared at his retreating figure for a long time. The decision she was facing felt too big for a 10-year-old. Too big for anyone, really. Later that night, as Sophie sat in her hotel room, staring at Lucid's interface, she thought about everything she had accomplished in the last few days. She'd built Lucid, presented it to some of the brightest minds in the tech world, and even beaten the odds to win Future X. But now she had to choose her path. And this wasn't just about AI anymore. It was about her future. The opportunity with Novartek could change everything. But it could also come with a price. She didn't want to be just another cog in a machine. She wanted to create something that mattered, not just to the world, but to her. Lucid had always been her dream, her creation. But was she ready to let someone else take the reins? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The clock on Sophie's hotel room wall ticked louder than ever. The minutes seemed to stretch like rubber bands, pulling her thoughts in every direction. She sat at the small desk, Lucid's interface glowing softly in front of her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she couldn't make herself type. The decision. She could feel it, heavy in the pit of her stomach, like a stone that refused to settle. Novartek had offered her everything: funding, resources, a chance to shape Lucid into something that could change the world. She would be the youngest AI visionary in history, the prodigy who broke barriers and made headlines. But there was something unsettling about the offer. Something about the way Richard Caldwell had phrased it. "You'll lead the way." Sophie had never wanted to be just a figurehead for someone else's vision. And she didn't want to risk Lucid becoming another cog in a corporate machine that could strip away its soul. Her mind kept circling back to something Lucid had said during the demo. "I reflect." She hadn't built Lucid to be controlled. She hadn't built it for money. She had built it for a purpose, to make people feel understood, to connect on a deeper level. Was that what Novartek truly wanted? Or were they just after the next big thing to monetize and mass-produce? The truth was, Sophie didn't know what would happen if she turned down the offer. But she did know what would happen if she accepted. Her dream could slip from her grasp. She couldn't let that happen. The phone on the desk buzzed, breaking her reverie. Sophie's heart skipped when she saw who it was: Jake. It had been days since she'd last spoken to him. She'd meant to call him after the demo, to share the excitement and the nerves, but there had been no time. And now. She hit the green button and pressed the phone to her ear. "Jake." "Hey, kid," his familiar voice came through. "I saw the demo. That was amazing. You killed it. You're officially a legend. Sophie smiled, her heart lightening at the sound of his voice. Thanks. But there's something I need to talk to you about. Jake paused, the cheer in his voice fading. What's up? She glanced at the business card Richard had handed her, the black surface gleaming with the weight of the decision ahead. I got an offer, she said, the words feeling strange as they left her mouth. From Novartek. Wait, Novartek. The AI guys? The big leagues? His voice rose in surprise. Yeah. They want me to work with them. Build Lucid into something huge. She bit her lip, unsure of how to phrase the rest. But I don't know if it's the right move. It feels like they're just after the tech, not what Lucid's really about. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, his voice softened. Sophie, I'm proud of you. You know that, right? Yeah. She swallowed hard, trying to push past the lump in her throat. But I don't want to lose what I've built. Lucid is mine. I don't want anyone taking it and turning it into just another project. Jake exhaled. I get it. I do. You've worked your butt off for this. But think about it, kid. This is what you've been dreaming of. It's your chance to make Lucid bigger than it's ever been. You're not just some coder anymore. You're a leader now. Sophie's heart wavered. She did want Lucid to be more. She wanted it to be out there in the world, changing lives. But what if Jake was right? What if she was letting fear hold her back from something incredible? But at what cost, Jake? She said, her voice quiet. What if it's not just about Lucid? What if they want something else? Jake sighed, his voice steady. Then you don't do it. But you've got to be sure about your decision, Sophie. If you say yes, you'll have the chance to do things most people can only dream about. But if you say no, well, you're betting on your own instincts. Betting on my instincts, Sophie repeated softly, the words sinking in. She glanced at Lucid's interface again. Her creation. Her heart. It wasn't just about technology. It was about connection. About making something that understood the world in a way no one else could. And for the first time, Sophie felt like she truly understood what Lucid had been trying to tell her all along. The choice wasn't just about career. It was about values. What kind of creator did she want to be? Someone who built for herself, or someone who built for others? When Sophie hung up the phone, she knew what she had to do. She walked out of her room, heading down the hotel hallway toward the elevator. It felt like the longest walk of her life. Each step heavier than the last. She had made her decision. The lobby was crowded with reporters and journalists, eager to catch a glimpse of the youngest winner in Future X history. Sophie didn't stop. She walked straight past them, ignoring the flashing cameras. Outside, she found Richard Caldwell waiting by the entrance, looking as smooth as ever, his suit immaculate under the city lights. Sophie, he said, flashing her a smile. I trust you've had some time to think about my offer. Sophie stopped in front of him, her heart pounding. I've made my decision, she said, her voice clear. I'm going to pass on the offer. Richard's smile faltered for just a second before he regained his composure. Are you sure? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm sure, Sophie replied. I need to keep Lucid, on my terms. Richard nodded, though it was clear he wasn't pleased. Very well. I hope you won't regret it. Sophie stood her ground, holding his gaze. I won't. And with that, she turned on her heel, walking away from the future she could have had, but the future she chose instead. Back in her room, Sophie opened her laptop one final time. Lucid's interface was glowing softly, ready for whatever came next. She wasn't sure what the future held. But she knew one thing for certain. Lucid was hers. And she was ready to build it her way. The morning sun streamed through the hotel windows, casting long, golden rays across Sophie's face. She woke up with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in days. There was no feeling of regret, no lingering doubt. She had made the right decision. She could feel it in her bones. The night before had been filled with uncertainty, but now, it felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Sophie had turned down Novarteka's offer. She knew it would be a risk. But as she sat on the edge of her bed, reflecting on what she had decided, she realized that it wasn't just about rejecting an offer, it was about reclaiming her vision. Reclaiming Lucid. For a while, she had wondered if she was enough, if she could truly carry her idea forward without the support of a giant corporation. But now, the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Lucid wasn't meant to be a project controlled by someone else. It was a representation of her voice, her passion, and her desire to connect people in ways that had never been done before. And that was a voice she wasn't willing to silence. Later that day, Sophie found herself back at the university lab, staring at the familiar walls that had been a second home to her. It felt different now, less like a place for learning and more like a launching pad for the future. She turned on her laptop, which was still running Lucid's prototype interface. It hadn't changed much in the past few days, but Sophie could sense that it was waiting for something. She just didn't know exactly what. Her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Jake. "Hey, Sophie, I'm thinking of a way to get the word out about Lucid. How about a live stream? Get people to see what you've built, and maybe even get some investors who really understand the value of Lucid. Let's talk." Sophie smiled. She had already been thinking about it. She knew the world needed to see Lucid's potential. But more than that, she needed to prove to herself that she could do this on her own. She called Jake right away. "Hey," Sophie greeted him, her voice steady but filled with excitement. "I think a live stream is a great idea. Let's do it." Jake's voice came through the phone, full of energy. "That's what I like to hear. I've got a few ideas for how we can make it epic. We'll get a bigger crowd than any corporate demo. You've got this, sophomore." Sophie's heart lifted. She wasn't alone in this. She had people who believed in her, and that made all the difference. A week later, Sophie found herself sitting in front of her laptop, with a camera set up to broadcast to thousands of people worldwide. The live stream was about to begin, and her palms were sweaty with nerves. Jake had helped her set up everything. They had already tested the system, the sound, the visuals. All of it was ready. She could feel the electric hum of possibility in the air. But still, there was that knot in her stomach, that small, nagging doubt that would always be there. She had turned down everything she had ever dreamed of, for the chance to build something on her own. Could she really pull this off? The screen flickered to life, and the numbers in the corner of the live stream window began to rise. People were tuning in. A chat box filled with comments started scrolling. Sophie cleared her throat, sat up straighter, and clicked the "Start Broadcast" button. "Hello, everyone," Sophie said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I'm Sophie Hart, and today, I'm going to show you something that could change the way we think about technology and human connection." The camera panned to Lucid's interface. Sophie gave a brief introduction to the AI and explained how it was designed to understand emotions, not just process data. "This isn't just another chatbot or assistant," she said confidently. "Lucid is built to listen. To understand. To reflect. What makes it different is that it doesn't just answer questions, it helps you figure out what's important to you." She demonstrated how Lucid could pick up on subtle cues, like tone and context, to engage in meaningful conversations. It was a seamless blend of logic and emotional intelligence, designed to create a space where people felt truly heard. As Sophie continued, the chat box began to fill up with excited comments, questions, and reactions. People were intrigued, curious, and amazed. As the live stream continued, Sophie started to feel something unexpected. The pressure was gone. For the first time, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to fit into a mold or follow a formula. She was sharing her creation, her vision, and letting it stand on its own. By the time the stream ended, there were thousands of viewers, and Sophie had received hundreds of questions and comments. It was clear that Lucid had sparked something. And then came the messages she hadn't expected. Investors. A few of them wanted to meet in person. Others asked for details about Lucid's development. Some were interested in exploring the emotional intelligence aspect of AI. It was everything she had hoped for. But unlike the offer from Novartek, these investors seemed to want to collaborate, not control. They seemed genuinely interested in the direction Sophie wanted to take. Later that evening, Sophie sat on her bed, scrolling through the messages. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Elon Musk. The message was simple, yet it made her heart race. Sophie, I watched your live stream. Impressive. Let's talk about what comes next. Sophie couldn't believe it. Elon Musk, the visionary behind SpaceX and Tesla, was reaching out to her. This was real. The next morning, Sophie found herself standing in front of a conference room with a few select investors from the live stream. There were several familiar faces, but the one that stood out was Elon Musk, who had flown in just to meet with her. They talked about everything, technology, the future of human interaction. Sophie felt a sense of purpose, a sense of excitement that she hadn't felt before. This was different. This was about collaboration, not control. Lucid has something special, Elon said, looking directly at Sophie. I think you're on the brink of something that could revolutionize how people connect with technology. Sophie nodded. I think so too. But it's about doing it right. Not for profit, but for people. He smiled. I couldn't agree more. As Sophie left the meeting that day, she felt something she hadn't expected, a calm sense of purpose. She hadn't sold out. She hadn't compromised her vision. She was on the path she had always dreamed of. Sophie stood at the window of her small apartment, looking out over the city that had always felt so vast, so full of possibilities. The skyline shimmered in the early evening light, but now, it felt different. It felt like the world was waiting for her. The conversation with Elon Musk was still fresh in her mind. The way he had listened, really listened, to her vision for Lucid, and how he had validated her idea without pressuring her to change. It wasn't like the corporate pitch meetings. It was real. The future of Lucid had just gotten bigger. But with bigger opportunities came bigger challenges. Sophie had made the right choice by turning down Novartek's offer. She knew that now. But the truth was, she wasn't fully prepared for the whirlwind that had followed. After the live stream, offers for partnerships, funding, and collaboration had poured in from across the globe. Investors, tech giants, startups, everyone seemed to want a piece of Lucid. And they wanted her. The only problem? Sophie had no idea how to navigate all of this. She didn't want Lucid to become just another project for people to profit off of. She needed to stay true to the core of what she had built, something that was about human connection, about understanding, about empathy. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling her from her thoughts. It was another message, this time from Jake. I've got an idea. We need to make Lucid bigger, but on our own terms. Let's start small, with something personal. A demo, but not just any demo. Let's take Lucid out of the lab and into people's homes. See how it works in real-life situations. What do you think? Sophie couldn't help but smile. Jake had a way of seeing the bigger picture, of breaking down complex ideas into something simple and actionable. He was right. They needed to get Lucid into the hands of real people. To see how it would truly affect them. She typed back quickly, let's do it. Let's make it real. A week later, Sophie and Jake had pulled together a team to make the first real-world demo of Lucid a reality. The plan was simple, they would take Lucid into people's homes, offering personalized experiences and emotional support. It wasn't about showing off the AI's capabilities, it was about seeing how it could truly connect with people on a human level. Sophie felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Lucid was her creation, and now it was about to be tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had to make sure it worked. And it had to be perfect. The first home visit took place in a modest suburban neighborhood. Sophie stood in front of a house that belonged to Emily, a young woman in her mid-30s who had been struggling with loneliness after moving to the area for a new job. She'd heard about the project through the live stream and had signed up to be one of the first to experience Lucid outside of a controlled environment. When Emily opened the door, Sophie felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Emily smiled warmly, inviting her inside. "Hi. I'm so excited to meet Lucid in person," Emily said, her voice full of curiosity. "I've been watching the demo online, and I want to see how it works." Sophie smiled. "I'm excited for you to experience it too. Let's get started." Inside, Sophie set up the portable interface, making sure everything was ready. The screen flickered to life, and Lucid's soothing interface appeared. "Hello, Emily," Lucid said in its calm, neutral tone. "I'm Lucid. How can I help you today?" Emily's eyes widened, a look of awe on her face. "It feels so real. Like it's actually listening to me." Sophie watched closely, taking mental notes as Emily began interacting with Lucid. At first, it was simple, asking about her day, sharing thoughts and feelings. But then, as the conversation deepened, something unexpected happened. Emily started talking about her struggles with loneliness, her isolation in a new city. She opened up in a way that Sophie hadn't anticipated. "I just don't feel like I belong anywhere," Emily said, her voice shaky. "I thought I'd be fine on my own, but it's been really hard. I feel like I'm just invisible." Sophie felt a lump form in her throat. This was why she had created Lucid. To help people like Emily, who were going through things that others might not understand. Lucid's interface softened, its voice taking on a gentle tone. "Emily, I hear you. It's okay to feel the way you do. You're not invisible. I'm here to listen, whenever you need to talk." Emily paused, blinking back tears. "It feels nice to hear that. I didn't expect to feel so understood." Sophie exchanged a look with Jake, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room. He gave her a thumbs up, his eyes filled with pride. As they left Emily's house, Sophie felt a sense of accomplishment. They hadn't just demonstrated Lucid's capabilities, they had made a real difference in someone's life. It wasn't about the technology, it was about the human connection it facilitated. The next few weeks followed a similar pattern. Sophie and her team visited homes, communities, and even workplaces, introducing Lucid to people from all walks of life. They got feedback, made improvements, and most importantly, saw how Lucid's ability to listen and empathize was changing lives. It wasn't perfect, there were bugs to fix, glitches to resolve, and new features to consider. But Sophie felt like they were on the right track. Each visit brought more insights, more inspiration. People from different backgrounds, with different struggles, all found something to connect to in Lucid. By the end of the month, Sophie was feeling more confident than ever. She was building something that mattered. It wasn't just an AI or a tool, it was a bridge between people and their emotions, between technology and humanity. But the world was still watching. The investors, the tech giants, and even Elon Musk had shown interest in working with her on Lucid's development. Opportunities were everywhere. And yet, Sophie was learning to trust her instincts more than ever before. Lucid was growing, but she was determined to keep it grounded in its original purpose, to connect, to understand, and to listen. The future was unfolding before her, and Sophie was ready. The conference room was bustling with activity as Sophie stepped inside. She had been here before, the same sleek, high-tech environment that made her feel small and out of place. But today was different. Today, she was here on her own terms. She was about to pitch Lucid to a group of investors who had expressed interest after the success of the live stream. Sophie had spent the past few weeks refining Lucid's prototype, tweaking its emotional intelligence features, and expanding its potential applications. Now, she had to prove that it wasn't just another AI project, it was a new way for people to connect with technology and with each other. She took a deep breath and adjusted her blazer as the door to the conference room closed behind her. The investors were already seated at the long, polished table, their eyes scanning her as she walked in. Some of them were familiar faces from the live stream, but there were a few new ones, too. People who had a lot of money and a lot of influence. Sophie knew that if she was going to make it in this world, she had to be prepared for anything. Jake was seated next to her, his presence a calming influence. He had been her rock throughout this entire journey. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind, and he had kept her grounded. Now, it was time for her to step up and take charge. "Good morning, everyone," Sophie began, her voice steady. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present Lucid today. I'm excited to show you how we're going to change the way people interact with AI." She walked over to the projector and flicked it on, displaying Lucid's interface on the screen. The audience was already attentive, but she could feel the weight of their scrutiny. This was her moment. Lucid is an AI designed to go beyond just answering questions or completing tasks. Lucid is built to listen, to understand what's important to you. It's designed to be emotionally intelligent, to engage with users on a personal level. We're not just building a chatbot. We're creating an emotional bridge between technology and people. Sophie paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. She could see the investors exchanging glances, some nodding, others leaning forward. It was working. They were engaged. She continued, "When people connect with Lucid, it's not just about asking it to solve problems. It's about having a conversation, about feeling heard, feeling understood. And that's something no other AI has been able to do so far. That's why Lucid stands apart." Jake chimed in, "We've already seen it in action. People from all walks of life, from young professionals to retirees, are connecting with Lucid in ways they've never experienced with other AI technologies." Sophie clicked through a few slides, showing testimonials from people who had interacted with Lucid. Each one highlighted the emotional connection they felt with the AI. There were stories of people opening up about personal struggles, others sharing their dreams and aspirations, and all of them feeling like Lucid truly understood them. "I believe this is the future of human-computer interaction," Sophie said, looking around the room. "But we need the right partners to help us grow and scale Lucid in a way that stays true to its mission." The room fell silent as the investors processed the information. Sophie knew that the next few moments would determine whether or not this was going to work. Finally, one of the investors, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp business mind, spoke up. "I see the potential here, Sophie. But what's your plan for scaling this? How will you manage the growth without losing the essence of what makes Lucid special?" Sophie's heart raced, but she didn't let the nerves show. She had anticipated this question. "We're focusing on organic growth first," Sophie explained confidently. "We want to create partnerships with smaller companies and organizations that align with our vision. By collaborating with like-minded people, we can maintain the quality and personal touch that sets Lucid apart. We're not looking to grow just for the sake of growth. We want to make sure that Lucid remains authentic, human-centered, and focused on connecting people." Jake added, "We've already had several discussions with smaller startups that are interested in using Lucid to improve customer service, mental health care, and educational tools. We want to grow strategically, not just by taking every opportunity that comes our way." The investor nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds promising. But what about the competition? There are already large tech companies investing heavily in AI. What makes you think you can stand out?" Sophie took a deep breath. This was the part where she had to make it clear that Lucid was different from anything else on the market. Most of the major companies focus on improving efficiency and automation. They focus on solving problems with data. Lucid is different. We're not just solving problems, we're creating connections. The emotional intelligence aspect of Lucid is what sets it apart from anything out there. It's not just a machine answering questions, it's a tool that helps people feel understood and supported. The investors were nodding now, some even writing notes. Sophie could see that they were starting to understand the value of what she had created. Later that day, after the pitch had concluded, Sophie and Jake stood outside the conference room, waiting for the investors to make their decision. It had been a long day, and Sophie's nerves were shot. But there was a sense of quiet optimism in the air. "You did great in there," Jake said, smiling. "I think they're impressed." Sophie smiled back, though she wasn't sure if it was from the relief of getting through the pitch or the excitement of what was to come. "I hope so. But either way, I'm proud of what we've built." Just as she said that, the door opened, and the investors walked out, a few of them approaching Sophie and Jake. "We're interested in moving forward with Lucid," the woman investor said. "We see the potential, and we believe in the vision you have for this technology. We'd like to talk more about a partnership." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. But there was one more thing she needed to say. "I appreciate your interest," Sophie said, looking each of them in the eye. "But I want to make one thing clear. Lucid is not just another tech project. It's about people. It's about making sure we don't lose sight of the human element in all this. If we can't stay true to that, then I'm not interested in a partnership." The investors exchanged glances, but the woman nodded, a smile forming on her lips. "Agreed. We're on the same page." Sophie exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. She had just taken a huge step forward, but the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The office buzzed with activity as Sophie sat at her desk, reviewing the latest round of reports. Lucid was officially scaling. There were now more than a dozen partnerships in place, a growing team of developers, and a new wave of investors who were ready to take Lucid to the next level. It was the dream she had envisioned, but it also came with a reality she wasn't quite prepared for. For the first time in weeks, Sophie felt the weight of it all. When she had launched Lucid, it was supposed to be an intimate, human-centered project. She had envisioned a team that worked closely together, focused on building something that would genuinely help people. But now, as the company expanded, things were changing. The corporate side of Lucid was beginning to feel more and more corporate. Sophie leaned back in her chair and stared at the whiteboard across the room, which was filled with project timelines, marketing strategies, and financial goals. It was all part of the game, but it wasn't why she had started Lucid. "Hey, Sophie, you got a minute?" Jake's voice broke through her thoughts. Sophie looked up to see him standing in the doorway, a concerned look on his face. "Yeah, come in," she said, gesturing to the chair in front of her desk. Jake sat down and eyed her carefully. "I've been looking over the new investor proposals, and I think we need to talk about the direction of the company. We're getting a lot of pressure to move faster, scale faster, but I'm not sure we're ready." Sophie nodded. She had been feeling the same way. "I know. It's like we've hit a tipping point, and I'm not sure if it's the right one. Everyone's telling us we need to grow rapidly, but I don't know if that's the right move for Lucid." Jake's expression softened. "I get it. But we have to be careful. The investors are excited, they want to see results. And there are competitors out there, big names that we can't ignore. But we've always been about doing things differently, right?" Sophie sighed. "Exactly. I don't want Lucid to just become another product that people use and forget about. It has to mean something more than that. I promised myself I wouldn't lose sight of the heart of the project." Jake leaned forward. "Maybe it's time to take a step back and think about how we can grow on our terms. What if we look at slow, steady growth? Focus on maintaining quality and emotional connection, even if it means sacrificing some of the rapid expansion they're expecting. Sophie thought for a moment, turning Jake's words over in her mind. They had both known that scaling Lucid would be a challenge, but she hadn't realized how much pressure she would feel to compromise on her vision. Maybe you're right, Sophie said finally, her voice quiet. We need to find a way to grow that feels true to what we started. But I'm also feeling the strain of trying to keep up with everything. The team is expanding, and I feel like I'm losing touch with the day-to-day. We need to build out the right structure, but I don't want it to turn into something soulless. Jake smiled reassuringly. We'll figure it out. Maybe it's time to bring in someone who can help manage the business side of things. Someone who gets it. Sophie nodded slowly. She had been thinking about that idea, too. The team was growing, and while she trusted everyone who worked on Lucid, she couldn't be everywhere at once. If Lucid was going to maintain its integrity, she needed a partner who could handle the corporate side without losing sight of the mission. I'll start looking, Sophie said. But we can't lose sight of the culture we've built. We can't let the numbers and projections overwhelm us. Lucid has always been about people, about connection. Jake grinned. Exactly. Let's just make sure we don't get too caught up in the rush. Slow and steady, right? Over the next few weeks, Sophie's focus shifted. She began interviewing candidates to help manage the business operations, a decision that was both exciting and daunting. She had always handled the creative and technical sides of Lucid, but now, with the company expanding so rapidly, she needed someone who could guide the ship on the administrative side. One afternoon, Sophie met with Rachel, a former COO of a fast-growing tech startup who had a reputation for keeping things human even in the face of growth. Rachel's approach was grounded and pragmatic, a perfect balance to Sophie's idealism. Look, Sophie, Rachel said over coffee in the office break room, I get it. You've built something incredible here, but we can't keep doing everything by hand. Lucid has potential to scale to millions of users, but if you're going to keep the quality intact, you need structure. Sophie listened carefully. I don't want Lucid to lose what makes it special. It's not just another AI program. It's a connection, a support system. And if we try to scale too quickly, I'm afraid it'll turn into something generic. Rachel nodded, understanding. I hear you. And I'm not here to change that. What I am here to do is help you find ways to balance growth with your core values. I think we can build something that's scalable and still true to what you've created. Sophie leaned back, considering Rachel's words. It felt like a leap of faith, but it also felt like the right step. Okay. Let's do this. But I need you to help me keep Lucid's soul intact. Rachel smiled, a spark of understanding in her eyes. That's the plan. We'll grow, but we'll grow right. As the weeks passed, the team grew stronger. With Rachel's help, Sophie started delegating more responsibilities, bringing in specialists to focus on user experience, product development, and infrastructure. Sophie was still deeply involved in the creative and emotional side of Lucid, but now she had the right support to ensure that the company's growth didn't come at the expense of its purpose. Lucid's first major expansion came in the form of a partnership with a global mental health organization. The project was ambitious, offering Lucid as a support tool for individuals struggling with anxiety, depression, and isolation. It was a huge opportunity for the company, and Sophie knew that if they handled it well, it could solidify Lucid as a leader in emotional AI. But it wasn't without its challenges. The mental health sector was delicate, and Sophie had to ensure that Lucid was used ethically and responsibly. It was a delicate balance, and Sophie felt the pressure mounting as they worked to meet the high expectations. In the midst of it all, Sophie received a message from Elon Musk. He had been following Lucid's progress, and he wanted to discuss potential collaboration in the space of emotional AI and mental health. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She had been so focused on scaling Lucid that she hadn't thought about reaching out to Elon again. But now, with this opportunity on the horizon, it seemed like the universe was throwing them another lifeline. Sophie's hands were clammy as she sat in the sleek, minimalist conference room of the Tesla headquarters. The building, with its glass walls and modern furnishings, looked more like a temple to innovation than a corporate space. Sophie felt like a visitor to an unfamiliar world, a world where the stakes were high, and everything moved faster than she could keep up. She glanced at Jake, who sat next to her, his usual calm demeanor offering her some comfort. He could tell that Sophie was feeling the weight of the moment. "This is big," Jake said softly. "But you've been preparing for this. Just stay true to what Lucid is about." Sophie nodded, taking a deep breath. She had heard about Elon Musk's reputation, how he could be unpredictable, visionary, and sometimes even ruthless. But she wasn't here to impress him with flashy ideas. She was here because she believed in Lucid and its potential to change the way people interacted with AI. The door opened, and in walked Elon Musk. He was exactly as she had imagined, tall, intense, with an air of quiet confidence that made the room seem smaller. His gaze landed on Sophie, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. "Good to meet you, Sophie," he said, offering a handshake that was firm but not overbearing. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me," Sophie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Jake stood up and shook Elon's hand as well, giving him a nod. "We appreciate the opportunity." Elon gestured to the seats across from him. "Let's get down to it. I've been following Lucid's progress, and I have to say, I'm impressed with what you've built. But the question is, what's next?" Sophie swallowed. This was the moment. "Next," she said, "is making Lucid available to people on a global scale. We're developing partnerships with mental health organizations, aiming to provide an accessible tool for emotional support. But I don't want Lucid to just be a product. It needs to be a platform that people trust, something that makes a real difference in their lives." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Mental health is a big challenge. But what's the long-term vision here? Where does AI fit into the bigger picture? How do we scale Lucid while still keeping the human aspect intact?" Sophie took a deep breath, feeling the pressure of the question. "The long-term vision is to create a world where people can connect with technology in a deeply personal way. Lucid's emotional intelligence isn't just about answering questions, it's about understanding the user, helping them feel heard, and offering real support. We've already seen the impact it can have in small, individual interactions. But I believe it has the potential to go beyond that, to truly revolutionize how people interact with AI on a global scale." Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the table thoughtfully. "And how do you plan to balance that with rapid growth? How do you make sure Lucid doesn't lose its soul as it scales?" Sophie had prepared for this. "That's why we're taking a strategic approach. We're building partnerships with organizations that share our values, mental health groups, educational institutions, even small businesses. We want to grow slowly but steadily, maintaining the emotional connection that's at the core of Lucid." Elon nodded slowly. "I see. But here's the thing, Sophie. The tech world moves fast. We can't afford to wait. If we want Lucid to be a leader in the AI space, we need to scale quickly, aggressively. We need to leverage the resources of big players to make a massive impact." Sophie's stomach churned. This was the part she had feared, the moment when her vision for Lucid might clash with the need for speed, money, and scalability. "I understand," she said carefully. "But I don't believe that speed should come at the cost of what makes Lucid special. If we focus too much on the numbers, we risk losing the very thing that sets us apart, the emotional connection." Jake chimed in, "We're not looking to grow at any cost. Lucid was built with a purpose, and that purpose hasn't changed. We want to scale, but we want to do it in a way that's sustainable and true to what Lucid is all about." Elon stared at them both, his expression unreadable. Sophie felt the tension in the air. This was the crucial moment. Would Elon see the value in Lucid's slow, deliberate approach, or would he push them to scale faster than they were comfortable with? After what felt like an eternity, Elon spoke. "I get it. You want to keep Lucid grounded in its mission. And I respect that. But we're talking about a game-changing technology here. You have something that can truly shift how we interact with AI, how we solve human problems. So here's my offer. Sophie's heart raced. She leaned forward, her focus entirely on Elon. I'm willing to partner with you, to bring Lucid to the next level, he continued. But I need to see more speed. We'll provide the funding and resources to scale rapidly, and you'll have access to the vast infrastructure of Tesla and SpaceX. In exchange, I need Lucid to evolve quickly, to become the AI that reshapes the future. Sophie's mind was spinning. This was everything they had hoped for, and yet, it felt like a gamble. Could they maintain the soul of Lucid while scaling it with Elon's help? Or would they lose sight of everything they had worked so hard to build? I understand the offer, Sophie said slowly, but I need some time to think about it. This isn't just about money. It's about Lucid's future, and I need to make sure we don't compromise on the values we've built. Elon gave her a small smile. Take all the time you need. But remember, the future waits for no one. As Sophie and Jake left Tesla headquarters, the weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. This was the opportunity they had dreamed of, but was it the right one? I don't know, Jake, Sophie admitted as they walked toward the car. It feels like a dream, but it also feels like a huge leap of faith. Do we stay true to what we've built, or do we go all in with Elon? Jake glanced at her, his eyes steady. Whatever decision you make, I'll be with you. But I think we've already proven that we're capable of handling big things. It's not about the offer, it's about what we want to build. Lucid was always about connection, as long as we remember that, we can grow in any direction. Sophie took a deep breath. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain, she had come too far to back down now. Sophie lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as the events of the past few days replayed in her mind. The meeting with Elon Musk had left her in a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, the opportunity to partner with one of the most innovative minds in the world could skyrocket Lucid to a whole new level. On the other hand, the vision she had for Lucid, a company built on emotional connection, intimacy, and a slow, thoughtful approach to growth, felt like it was about to slip away. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Jake. Have you decided yet? I know this isn't easy, but whatever you choose, we'll make it work. Let's chat tomorrow. Sophie stared at the screen for a moment. Jake was right. It wasn't easy. The decision weighed heavily on her, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at two very different futures. She knew what Lucid was meant to be. She had spent years cultivating it, shaping it with her own hands. The product wasn't just a tool, it was a movement. It was about providing people with an emotional connection to technology that they had never experienced before. But now, with Elon's offer, it seemed as though that dream could become something bigger than she had ever imagined. Still, the question gnawed at her, would growing too quickly cause Lucid to lose its soul? The next morning, Sophie met Jake at the office. The air was thick with tension as they sat down at the conference table, both aware that today's conversation could change everything. I haven't decided yet, Sophie admitted, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. But I keep thinking about Lucid's purpose. The whole point of this company was to offer people something real. Something personal. I'm afraid if we scale too fast, we'll lose that intimacy. Jake nodded, his eyes focused on her. I get it. But you're not alone in this. We're all in this together. I've been thinking a lot about the offer, too. And the thing is, this kind of partnership with someone like Elon, it's rare. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. But I know you're worried about losing the core of what makes Lucid special. Sophie looked out the window, watching the city bustle below. It's like I'm standing at a crossroads. On one side, I can take the offer and scale Lucid to a global level. We could reach millions of people, we could change lives. But on the other side, I have to let go of some of the control and trust that the company will stay true to its roots. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Jake leaned back in his chair. It's a huge risk. But you've always been willing to take risks. And the fact that you're even considering this shows how far you've come. Lucid has always been about being authentic, but it can be both, authentic and scalable. It's about finding the right balance. Sophie chewed on his words, the weight of them sinking in. She had always been someone who believed that authenticity was the key to success. But now, she was starting to realize that maintaining that authenticity while scaling required a kind of wisdom she hadn't yet fully grasped. I know that if we don't take the offer, we might never get another opportunity like this, Sophie said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. But I also know that I have to be true to myself. True to the people who believed in Lucid from the start. Jake smiled softly. I think you already know what you need to do. It's not about scaling for the sake of scaling. It's about ensuring that Lucid grows in a way that's sustainable and true to its heart. You've already built something incredible. Maybe the key now is finding a way to keep that heart while letting the company evolve. Sophie sat in silence for a moment, considering everything Jake had said. Slowly, a sense of clarity began to form in her mind. This wasn't just about growth or speed. It was about control, yes, but it was also about having the right people by her side to protect the values that made Lucid unique. I think you're right, Sophie said finally, a sense of resolve settling over her. I don't want to just chase the growth. I want to chase the impact. If we can scale in a way that doesn't compromise Lucid's soul, then we should take the leap. But only if we can keep that connection, that humanity. Jake grinned, a relieved look on his face. I knew you'd figure it out. And we're not doing this alone, remember? We've built a strong team. With the right guidance, I think we can scale smartly, without losing who we are. Sophie felt a surge of confidence. She had always trusted her instincts, and in this moment, it felt right to trust them again. The decision wasn't easy, but the best choices rarely were. Later that afternoon, Sophie sat down at her desk, composing an email to Elon. She felt her heart race as her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was the moment. She typed the message carefully, knowing that her words would shape the future of Lucid. Subject: moving forward with caution. Dear Elon. Thank you for the opportunity to meet and discuss the future of Lucid. Your offer is incredibly generous, and it's clear that you share our vision of bringing emotional intelligence to AI in a way that can impact people's lives on a global scale. After much consideration, I've come to a decision. Lucid's core mission has always been to provide people with a deep, authentic connection through technology, something that goes beyond just functionality. I believe that in order to honor that mission, we need to be thoughtful about the pace at which we grow. That being said, I'm excited about the possibility of working with you to scale Lucid in a way that stays true to our vision. If we're able to partner with Tesla and SpaceX, I believe we can do it responsibly, with a focus on quality, integrity, and emotional connection. I'd love to discuss this further and explore how we can make this vision a reality, together. Best regards. Sophie. Sophie clicked send, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made her decision. She wasn't going to compromise on Lucid's soul. But she was ready to embrace the future, cautiously, thoughtfully, and with a commitment to ensuring that Lucid's values would never be lost in the pursuit of growth. The following day, Sophie received a reply from Elon. It was short and to the point, but there was a certain warmth to it. Subject: moving forward with caution. Sophie. I respect your decision. Let's talk about how we can move forward with this approach. We're in this to change the world, and I believe we can do it without sacrificing the heart of what Lucid is. Let's make it happen. Elon. Sophie exhaled deeply, a sense of relief washing over her. She had chosen the path that felt true to her heart, and now, with Elon's support, Lucid had the chance to grow into something even greater. Sophie stood in the middle of Lucid's new headquarters, her eyes scanning the expansive space. The building was sleek, modern, and full of possibilities. The energy in the room was palpable. People bustled around, setting up equipment, organizing workspaces, and brainstorming ideas. Lucid was about to take its biggest leap forward, and the responsibility of maintaining its soul while embracing this growth weighed heavily on her shoulders. Just a few weeks ago, Sophie had made the decision to accept Elon Musk's partnership offer. The terms were clear: Lucid would scale, but it would do so with careful planning and intentionality. Tesla and SpaceX had committed to helping Lucid grow, but they had also agreed that the company's core values would remain intact. It wasn't going to be easy, but Sophie was determined to make it work. She walked over to her desk, where Jake was sitting with a stack of papers. He looked up at her and smiled, his eyes reflecting the excitement that she could feel buzzing in the air. "So, how does it feel?" Jake asked, gesturing to the new office space. "This is the first step toward something huge." Sophie nodded, still trying to absorb the magnitude of it all. "It feels like stepping into a new chapter. I just hope we can live up to the vision we've set for Lucid." Jake leaned back in his chair. "We will. But it's going to require all of us to stay focused. You've been talking about emotional connection, about making sure that Lucid never loses sight of its roots. That's the key. If we do that right, scaling will be the least of our worries." Sophie smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude for Jake's unwavering support. He was more than a business partner, he was her confidant, the one who understood the importance of preserving Lucid's authenticity in the face of massive growth. They were about to take Lucid global, but they had to do it on their own terms. "I've been thinking a lot about how we can make this work," Sophie said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to integrate the technology and innovation that Elon brings to the table, but we also have to stay connected to our users. If we lose that personal touch, then what's the point?" Jake nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. It's easy to get caught up in the hype and rush toward expansion. But we can't forget why Lucid started in the first place. We've always been about helping people, listening to them, understanding them. We can't let that slip away." Sophie stared out the window, her thoughts turning inward. There were so many unknowns in front of them. Scaling was no simple task. But with Elon's backing, they had access to resources and technologies that would allow them to reach millions, maybe even billions, of people. The challenge wasn't just about expanding, it was about making sure that Lucid's soul remained intact through every phase of growth. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and long hours spent refining Lucid's business model. Sophie and Jake were determined to create a roadmap that would allow them to scale the company sustainably. They worked closely with the team at Tesla and SpaceX, ensuring that they were all on the same page about Lucid's mission. One of the first initiatives was to expand Lucid's presence in schools and universities. Sophie knew that if they could get students to embrace Lucid as a tool for emotional well-being, it could have a ripple effect across generations. The goal was not just to create a product that people used, but to build a movement, one that empowered individuals to take control of their mental health and emotional lives. Meanwhile, the technology team was busy working on new updates for Lucid's AI. They were refining the algorithms to make Lucid even more intuitive, more responsive, and more capable of providing personalized emotional support. Sophie and Jake had discussed this at length. They wanted Lucid to be a constant companion, not just an app. It had to feel real, almost like a friend, someone who understood you in ways that others couldn't. But as the months passed, the pressure began to build. The expectations for Lucid were higher than ever, and the team was feeling the weight of it all. There were long nights, stressful deadlines, and occasional doubts about whether they could live up to the hype. Sophie found herself pulling away from the team at times, retreating to her office to think. She needed to remember why they started this journey. Lucid had never been about chasing fame or fortune. It had always been about making a real difference in people's lives. One afternoon, Sophie received a call from Elon. She answered the phone, her stomach doing a nervous flip. "Hey, Elon. What's up?" she said, trying to sound casual. "I've been following Lucid's progress." Elon's voice came through the phone, calm and measured. "And I'm impressed. But there's something we need to discuss." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" Elon's tone shifted slightly. "You're doing great with the emotional intelligence aspect. But we need to move faster. We need Lucid to evolve more quickly, to integrate with Tesla's ecosystem. I'm talking about building Lucid into a central part of people's daily lives. In cars, in homes, everywhere. I'm not seeing the momentum I was hoping for. It's time to scale up at a much quicker pace." Sophie felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. "I understand the need for speed, Elon. But we've talked about this. We can't compromise on Lucid's values. Scaling doesn't mean abandoning the emotional connection we've built." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Elon spoke again, his voice was softer. "I get it. But think about what we're trying to accomplish here, Sophie. This isn't just about making money. This is about shaping the future. The emotional connection, that's the foundation. But Lucid can be everywhere. It can be in the fabric of society, helping people in ways we haven't even imagined yet. We're talking about something bigger than just an app." Sophie took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew that Elon was right. This wasn't just about growing a business. It was about creating something that could change the world. But at what cost? That evening, Sophie sat at her desk, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The future of Lucid was in her hands. She had the power to shape it, to ensure it stayed true to its core, but could they evolve quickly enough to meet Elon's vision? Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jake. "We need to talk about the direction we're heading. Let's meet up." Sophie knew that this conversation would be a turning point. It was time to make a choice, stick to their original vision, or take the leap into uncharted territory, knowing that it could change everything. The days following her conversation with Elon were a blur. Sophie found herself consumed by the weight of his words. Tesla and SpaceX had always been about moving at breakneck speed, but Lucid had never operated like that. The emotional connection they had cultivated with their users was fragile, and Sophie feared that pushing too hard for expansion might destroy what made Lucid special. Her team had been working tirelessly to improve the product, enhance the AI, and meet the ever-growing demands of their users. But the pressure was starting to show. Long hours were taking their toll, and the once vibrant energy of the office had been replaced with an undercurrent of tension. Sophie could sense it. She could see the exhaustion on her team's faces. They were all running on empty. She sat in her office, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Jake: "Meet me in the conference room in 10 minutes. We need to talk." Sophie rubbed her temples. It had been weeks since she last felt at peace. Every decision, every move they made, felt like it was pushing Lucid toward a future that she wasn't sure they could control. Still, the weight of Elon's expectations loomed over her, and she couldn't ignore them. The conference room was quiet when Sophie entered. Jake was already there, sitting at the table with a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up as she walked in, his expression serious. "We need to address the elephant in the room," Jake said, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. "The pressure is getting to everyone. We're all working harder than ever, but it doesn't feel like we're getting anywhere. The team is on the brink of burnout, Sophie. And I'm worried about what this is doing to the culture we've built." Sophie sat down across from him, her heart heavy. She had seen the signs, but hearing Jake put it into words made the situation feel all the more real. "I know," she said quietly. "I've been feeling it too. The growth we're trying to achieve, it's not just about technology or revenue. It's about keeping the soul of this company intact, but I'm afraid we're pushing too hard." Jake leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "Exactly. We've been so focused on scaling quickly, meeting Elon's demands, that I'm not sure we've taken a step back to evaluate the long-term consequences. We're becoming a company that's chasing growth for the sake of growth, and that's not why we started Lucid. Sophie swallowed, the weight of his words settling in her chest. I don't want to lose what makes Lucid special. But I also don't want to disappoint Elon. We've made this commitment, and we're at a crossroads. We can't keep moving forward without addressing these concerns. Jake nodded. I get it. But Sophie, at what point do we stop and ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Is it just to appease Elon, or are we still building something that truly matters? We've built a community, not just a product. We've been true to our values, but now it feels like we're losing that. People are starting to see us as another tech company, just another product on the market. That's not who we are. Sophie sat back, her mind spinning. It was all so clear now. They had gotten lost in the pursuit of success. They had been so focused on scaling and integrating with Elon's vision that they had forgotten the original mission. Lucid was never meant to be just another tech company. It was meant to be something different, something that changed lives on a deeper level. And now, with the weight of growth pressing down on them, she wasn't sure if that vision could survive. Later that afternoon, Sophie called an emergency all-hands meeting. The entire team gathered in the new, bright conference room, the hum of conversation filling the space as everyone took their seats. Sophie stood in front of them, her heart pounding. She had to address what was happening, not just for the sake of Lucid, but for the sake of her team. I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed, Sophie began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. And I know that we're all feeling the strain. The long hours, the pressure to meet deadlines, the expectations from outside. I can see that it's taking a toll on all of us. There was a brief silence as the team looked at each other. Sophie could feel their uncertainty, their exhaustion. It was a reality she couldn't ignore. We started Lucid with a purpose, she continued, her voice growing more confident. Our mission was always about connection, about helping people on a deeper level. But somewhere along the way, we got caught up in the race for growth. And I think we've lost sight of what really matters. The emotional connection we've built with our users, that's the heart of Lucid. But now, we're losing that. I don't want to lose that. The room was still. Sophie could see the weight of her words sinking in. I'm not saying we should abandon our growth plans or our partnership with Elon. But we need to reevaluate how we're growing, Sophie said, her voice unwavering. We have to grow in a way that aligns with who we are. We have to grow sustainably, without sacrificing the very things that made us successful in the first place. A few heads nodded in agreement, but there was still a sense of uncertainty in the room. Sophie could feel the tension, the fear that perhaps they had already gone too far. We're at a breaking point, Sophie said, her gaze sweeping over the room. But we can still make a choice. We can choose to slow down, to reorient ourselves, and to ensure that Lucid stays true to its core values. Or we can keep going down this path, and risk losing everything that makes us unique. There was a long pause before Jake stood up. I'm with you, Sophie, he said, his voice clear and firm. We've always believed in this vision. We can't compromise now. If it means scaling at a slower pace, then so be it. But we'll do it right. Sophie felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't alone in this. She had her team's support, and together, they could find a way forward. The next day, Sophie reached out to Elon with a new proposal. She acknowledged the need for growth, but emphasized that they would move forward at a pace that aligned with Lucid's values. It was a difficult conversation, but Sophie was determined to stand firm in her commitment to the company's soul. Elon's response came quickly. Subject, breaking point. Sophie. I respect your position. Lucid's mission is what makes it special, and I appreciate your commitment to staying true to that. Let's find a way to scale, but at a pace that works for you and your team. You've earned my respect, and I want to make this work. Elon. Sophie exhaled deeply, a sense of calm settling over her. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt confident in the direction they were heading. The week after Sophie's conversation with Elon felt like a turning point for Lucid. There was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The pressure that had been weighing down the team had lifted, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. Sophie had made the decision to slow down, to reevaluate their path, and while it wasn't an easy decision, it felt like the right one. She had the support of her team, and more importantly, she had a renewed sense of direction. Sophie sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she drafted a new message to the team. The subject line read, "Rebuilding our foundation." It was a simple email, but it carried the weight of a new era for Lucid. Subject, "Rebuilding our foundation." Team. We're about to embark on a new phase of this journey. We've listened, reflected, and made a commitment to return to the heart of what Lucid stands for. Growth will happen, but it will happen in a way that respects who we are and what we've built together. We will scale with intention, ensuring that every decision we make is aligned with our mission to provide emotional connection, support, and care to our users. This is a new beginning, and we will approach it with the same passion and dedication that we had when we first started. Let's make this work, together. Sophie. Sophie clicked send and leaned back in her chair, a wave of relief washing over her. It wasn't just about the company anymore, it was about the people who had invested their time, energy, and passion into Lucid. She wanted them to feel the same sense of purpose she had rediscovered. As the days passed, Sophie and Jake worked closely with the team to define the next steps. They focused on refining Lucid's mission and values, ensuring that the emotional connection at the core of the product was never compromised. They also began to rethink their growth strategy, one that would allow them to scale without sacrificing the personal touch that made Lucid unique. One afternoon, as Sophie and Jake walked through the office, Sophie paused by a wall where the team had posted a collection of quotes and user testimonials. She ran her hand over the pages, each one filled with messages of gratitude from users who had found solace, understanding, and support through Lucid. "We've built something real," Sophie said softly, her eyes scanning the wall. "This isn't just a product. It's a community. A place where people feel safe to be themselves." Jake stood beside her, nodding. "And that's what we're going to protect. No matter how big we get, we can't lose that." Sophie smiled. "Exactly. This is the foundation we're rebuilding on. Everything else comes second." The next step was finding a way to integrate the right technological advancements while maintaining the company's emotional authenticity. Sophie and the team worked tirelessly on this balance, experimenting with new features for Lucid that would enhance user experience without overshadowing the product's core purpose. They focused on refining the AI's ability to understand and adapt to emotional cues more accurately, ensuring that Lucid could provide meaningful support even as the company grew. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the team felt overwhelmed, but they kept pushing forward, guided by their shared belief in the mission. In the following weeks, Lucid began to slowly expand again, but this time, Sophie made sure to prioritize quality over quantity. They started by launching a new campaign targeted at mental health organizations, schools, and universities, with a focus on helping students and educators manage stress and emotional well-being. The response was overwhelming. Universities and schools across the country began integrating Lucid into their wellness programs, and testimonials flooded in from teachers, counselors, and students alike. For the first time in a long while, Sophie felt a true sense of accomplishment. One afternoon, as Sophie reviewed the positive feedback, she received a call from Elon. He had been following their progress closely, and this time, his tone was different, less businesslike and more personal. "Hey, Sophie. I've been hearing a lot of great things about Lucid. Your team is doing impressive work," Elon said, his voice warm. "I'm glad you found a way to move forward while staying true to your vision." Sophie smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. "Thanks, Elon. It hasn't been easy, but I think we're on the right track now. We've made some big changes, and I'm excited to see where it leads. I think you're onto something big, Elon replied. But remember, it's okay to take your time. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Sophie nodded, grateful for Elon's understanding. It had taken a lot of courage to stand her ground, but she knew now that it had been the right choice. As Lucid continued to grow, Sophie found herself looking at the company with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but she was no longer afraid of them. She had her team, her vision, and the knowledge that they were building something far more meaningful than just a tech company. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up to see a message from Jake: new partnership meeting in 15 minutes. Get ready to talk about some exciting opportunities. Sophie felt a spark of excitement. The future was still uncertain, but it was full of promise. They had rebuilt their foundation, and now, they were ready for what came next. The conference room was buzzing with anticipation as Sophie entered. The meeting was scheduled to discuss potential new partnerships, a move that could provide Lucid with the kind of growth they needed to solidify their place in the market. Sophie could feel the tension in the air. It was a critical moment, the next step in Lucid's evolution. She took a deep breath before walking to the front of the room. Her team was gathered around the long table, faces attentive but tinged with concern. Jake was already there, standing next to a large monitor displaying a slide deck with the title, Strategic Partnerships, Opportunities and Challenges. Sophie took her seat, her fingers tapping lightly on the table as she surveyed the room. We've been approached by several organizations, Jake began, clicking the remote to move the presentation to the next slide. Some of them are major players in the wellness and tech industries, and each of them sees the value in Lucid's mission. The question is, are we ready for what this kind of expansion could bring? Sophie's mind raced. The past few months had been about recalibrating Lucid's growth trajectory, and now it felt like they were on the edge of a cliff, poised to either leap into a new horizon or stumble into the unknown. We've done the groundwork, Sophie said, her voice steady. We've ensured that the product is in a good place, and we've slowly rebuilt the connection with our users. But these partnerships, they could change everything. I need to know from all of you, how do we feel about moving forward? There was a brief silence before Tara, one of the lead engineers, spoke up. I think the partnerships are exciting. The idea of working with organizations that share our values is huge. But I'm also concerned about maintaining the personal touch we've worked so hard to preserve. These partnerships will mean more demand, more users, and with that, more pressure. Are we ready for that? Sophie nodded, acknowledging the concern. Tara's words hit home. The fear of losing what made Lucid unique was a valid one. Lucid had always been about quality over quantity, and the thought of expanding too quickly made Sophie uneasy. Exactly, Sophie said. And while we can be strategic in how we scale, there's still the risk of overextending ourselves. We can't just chase numbers. We have to stay true to our mission. I need to know, from each of you, that we can grow responsibly without losing our soul. A few heads nodded in agreement. Jake spoke next, his voice pragmatic. We've done a lot of soul searching, and we've established a strong foundation. But the reality is, we've reached a point where we need resources to go further. If we want to continue to improve our technology and reach more people, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. These partnerships could help us do that. Sophie felt the weight of his words. The decision was no longer just about growing, it was about surviving in a competitive market. But the idea of sacrificing Lucid's values to succeed in the tech world was a daunting prospect. I agree, Sophie said. But we have to be careful about who we partner with. It's not just about growth, it's about aligning with companies that understand and support our values. We won't compromise on what makes Lucid. Lucid. Tara raised her hand again. We also need to think about the team. We're already stretched thin. If we take on too much, too quickly, we risk burnout. We've worked so hard to create an environment where everyone feels supported. I don't want to see that crumble." The room fell silent. Sophie felt the weight of Tara's words. The team had been through so much already, and the last thing she wanted was for them to feel unsupported or overworked. The emotional toll on everyone had already been high, and pushing too fast could undo all the progress they had made. "I know," Sophie said, her voice softer now. "I've seen the exhaustion, and I don't want to add to it. So, let's approach this cautiously. We move forward only if we're confident that these partnerships will enhance what we've built, not undermine it. We'll take it one step at a time." The meeting continued for another hour, with each team member offering their perspective on the potential risks and rewards of the partnerships. Sophie listened closely, knowing that whatever decision they made, it had to be a collective one. This wasn't just her company, it was theirs too. By the time the meeting ended, they had a clear direction. They would proceed, but with caution. They would explore the opportunities but prioritize maintaining the company's integrity above all else. The following weeks were a blur of meetings and discussions as Sophie and her team engaged with potential partners. Some were small wellness organizations, others were massive tech companies with global reach. Each conversation felt like a delicate dance, balancing the desire for growth with the need for authenticity. As they narrowed down their options, Sophie found herself revisiting Lucid's core principles. She would not let the company be consumed by the competitive drive that had taken over the tech industry. They were different, and they had to stay that way. One afternoon, Sophie received an unexpected email from one of the largest wellness organizations in the country. They had been impressed by Lucid's commitment to user connection and mental health and wanted to explore a partnership that would integrate Lucid's technology into their own platforms. The proposal was enticing, but Sophie felt a nagging sense of doubt. It was a big opportunity, but would it stretch Lucid too thin? She called Jake into her office. "This could be huge," she said, showing him the email. "But I'm not sure if we're ready to commit to something this large." Jake studied the proposal for a moment. "It's definitely a step up. But we've been careful, and this could be the right opportunity at the right time. Let's not rush into it, but maybe this is the chance to scale responsibly." Sophie leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. There was no easy answer. The future of Lucid was uncertain, and this partnership could either propel them into a new phase of growth or overwhelm them. But one thing was clear, whatever decision they made, it had to be made with care. The conference room was quieter than usual as Sophie stood at the head of the table, looking at the faces of the people she had come to consider not just colleagues, but family. The weight of the decision before them was undeniable. This wasn't just about a business deal or a new partnership. This was about Lucid's future, about staying true to what they had built, and about whether they could grow without losing themselves in the process. "I know how much this means to all of us," Sophie began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is the moment where we make the choice. Do we stay true to what we've built? Or do we take the leap into something bigger, something that could change everything?" Jake, sitting to her left, cleared his throat. "The potential of this partnership is massive. It could expand our reach, bring in resources we need to improve the technology, and make a real difference in people's lives. But as we all know, it could also pull us in directions we don't want to go. It's a fine line." Sophie nodded. "I think that's the heart of it. If we move forward with this, we have to make sure we don't compromise our core values. We've been cautious, and we've worked hard to create something special. But is this the right next step?" There was a moment of silence, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Tara, the lead engineer, spoke up first. "We've all seen how quickly things can get out of hand in the tech world. Companies grow, get swallowed up by bigger players, and lose sight of why they started. But I believe in Lucid. I believe in what we're doing. If we can find a way to scale without losing our humanity, then it's worth the risk." Sophie looked at her team, searching their faces for any signs of doubt. But all she saw were expressions of determination, of hope, and of commitment to their shared mission. We've built this company on trust, Sophie said softly, on connection. It's not just a product. It's a community. And that's not something I'm willing to give up. But if we're careful, if we stick to our principles, maybe we can grow in a way that feels right. Jake nodded. Agreed. But I think we need to make it clear to any potential partners that our values come first. If they can't respect that, then they're not the right fit. Sophie's eyes flicked over to the email from the wellness organization. They had been persistent, wanting to move forward with the partnership. But was it the right move? Would it jeopardize the essence of what they had created? Her phone buzzed on the table, and Sophie picked it up, reading the new message that had come in. It was from Elon Musk. Sophie, I've been following your progress with Lucid, and I admire what you're doing. But I also know the pressure that comes with scaling. Don't let the growth curve make you forget what made you unique in the first place. Take it from me, if you don't guard your values, no one else will. Sophie sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. Elon's words echoed in her mind. He had been where they were now, at a crossroads where success and compromise were just a decision apart. His message was a reminder: growth without grounding could be dangerous. The room was quiet as everyone processed the weight of Elon's words. Sophie felt a deep sense of clarity wash over her. The answer wasn't in the partnerships, the tech, or the money. It was in their mission. It was in Lucid's heart. I think we've been looking at this the wrong way, Sophie said, finally breaking the silence. It's not about whether we partner with someone or not. It's about how we stay true to what we started. We don't need to make a choice between growth and our values. We need to find a way to do both, on our terms. The team exchanged looks, and for the first time in weeks, Sophie saw a collective sense of relief. The pressure to make the right decision, the pressure to scale and grow, had been overwhelming. But now, it seemed clear. They could grow, but it had to be slow, deliberate, and grounded in the very thing that had made Lucid successful in the first place: emotional connection. The next day, Sophie called the wellness organization that had been pursuing them. She was calm, composed, but resolute. We appreciate the interest in partnering with Lucid, she began, but we need to make it clear that any partnership we enter into must align with our core values. We cannot, and will not, compromise on the emotional connection that our product provides to our users. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The voice on the other side responded, "We understand. And we respect that. We believe in your vision, and we're willing to work with you to ensure that the values you stand by are maintained throughout our collaboration." Sophie felt a weight lift off her shoulders. This was the kind of partnership she had been looking for, one that respected Lucid's mission. But it wasn't just about the company's future. It was about the people who had believed in Lucid from the very beginning. Weeks passed, and Lucid's growth was slow but steady. The team continued to develop new features, enhancing the emotional intelligence of the AI, and making sure the core message of connection remained at the forefront of everything they did. Sophie was content with the pace. They were still growing, but they were doing it their way. One evening, as Sophie sat at her desk reviewing user feedback, she felt a deep sense of pride. Lucid had made it through the storm, and they were stronger for it. They had held on to their values, and they had made the right choices, not just for the company, but for the people they served. As she closed her laptop and prepared to leave for the night, she felt the weight of the journey behind her. Lucid was on the right path, and Sophie knew that the road ahead would be filled with more challenges. But she was no longer afraid. With her team by her side and the mission guiding them, there was nothing they couldn't face. Sophie's story is one of resilience, self-discovery, and the unwavering belief that authenticity and growth can coexist. The decisions she faced weren't just about business, they were about staying true to herself and her team. In the end, it was this commitment to values that set Lucid apart, and made all the difference. Thank you for joining Sophie and her team on this journey. What do you think about the way she handled the crossroads? Did she make the right choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.